Hello and welcome to the Oak Tree English Poetry live stream. Today I did something, I tried to do this earlier, but it didn't work because I was using different software. So I've gone back to this format and we'll see whether that has any difference. So we're going to dive straight in with Sea Fever by John Masefield. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sails shaking, and grey mists on the sea's face and a grey dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. And where are we sailing to? Well, let's sail to Italy, specifically to Sicily. In Sicily, they have snakes. D.H. Lawrence wrote about one. And it is that I'm going to read. A snake came to my water trough on a hot day, and I in pyjamas for the heat to drink there. In the deep, strange scented shade of a great dark carob tree, I came down the steps with my pitcher, and must stand and wait, for there he was at the trough before me. He reached down from a fissure in the earth wall, in the gloom, and trailed his yellow-brown slackness, soft-bellied, down over the edge of the stone trough, and rested his throat upon the stone bottom. And where the water had dripped from the tap in a small clearness, he sipped with his straight mouth, softly drank through his straight gums into his slack, long body, silently. Someone was before me at my water trough, and I, like a second comer, waiting. He lifted his head from his drinking, as cattle do, and looked at me vaguely, as drinking cattle do, and flickered his two-forked tongue from his lips, and mused a moment, and stooped and drank a little more. Being earth-brown, earth-golden from the burning bowels of the earth, on the day of Sicilian July, with Etna smoking. The voice of my education said to me, "He must be killed!" For in Sicily, the black snakes are innocent, the gold are venomous. And voices in me said, "If you were a man, you would take a stick and break him now and finish him off." But I must confess how I liked him, how glad I was he had come like a guest in quiet to drink at my water trough and depart, peaceful, pacified, and thankless, into the burning bowels of this earth. Was it cowardice that I dared not kill him? Was it perversity that I longed to talk to him? Was it humility to feel so honoured? I felt so honoured. And yet, those voices, "If you were not afraid, you would kill him." And truly, I was afraid. I was most afraid. But even so, honoured still more that he should seek my hospitality from out the dark door of the secret earth. He drank enough and lifted his head dreamily as one who has drunken, and flickered his tongue like a forked knight on the air, so black, seeming to lick his lips, and looked around like a god, unseeing into the air, and slowly turned his head, and slowly, very slowly, as if thrice a dream, proceeded to draw his slow length, curving round, and climb again the broken bank of my wall face. And as he put his head into that dreadful hole, and as he slowly drew up, snake easing his shoulders and entering farther, a sort of horror, a sort of protest against his withdrawing into that horrid black hole, deliberately going into the blackness and slowly drawing himself after, overcame me now his back was turned. I looked round. I put down my pitcher. I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water trough with a clatter. I think it did not hit him, but suddenly that part of him that was left behind convulsed in undignified haste, writhed like lightning, and was gone into the black hole, the earth-lipped fissure in the wall front, at which, in the intense still noon, I stared with fascination. And immediately I regretted it. I thought, how paltry, how vulgar, what a mean act. I despised myself and the voices of my accursed human education. And I thought of the albatross, and I wished he would come back to my snake. For he seemed to me again like a king in exile, uncrowned in the underworld, now due to be crowned again. And so I missed my chance with one of the lords of life, and I have something to expiate. A pettiness. Taormina, 1923. Well, we're going to go further back in time now, and we're going to enter a genre of poetry. Everyone's a critic. A genre of poetry which I like to call horny young man poetry. This one was popularized by Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. Just the first few lines, but you may recognize it. It's called To the Virgins to Make Much of Time by Robert Herrick. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent, the worse and worst times still succeed the former. Then be not coy, but use your time, and while ye may go marry, for having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. And this injunction not to be coy is one which was echoed by Andrew Marvell in To His Coy Mistress. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long loved stay. Thou by the Indian Ganges side shouldst rubies find, I by the tide of Humber would complain. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow, 100 years should go to praise thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze, 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest, an age at least to every part, and the last age should show your heart. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity, and your quaint honour turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Now, therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may, and now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow-chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. This is one of the few poems which it actually sounds better in, or the rhymes work better in a Brummie accent. And yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity. You see, it kind of works better for the rhymes, though it's difficult to listen to. Personal opinion. Now, the line there I'd like to pick up on is that the grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. And I'd like to pick that up with a poem by Philip Larkin called An Arundel Tomb, about a tomb in Chichester Cathedral. By the way, Chichester Cathedral, well worth a visit, a lovely place. Side by side, their faces blurred, the Earl and Countess lie in stone, their proper habits vaguely shown as jointed armour, stiffened pleat, and that little faint hint of the absurd, the little dogs under their feet. Such plainness of the pre-Baroque hardly involves the eye until it meets his left-hand gauntlet, still, clasped empty the other, and one sees, with a sharp, tender shock, his hand withdrawn, holding her hand. They would not think to lie so long, such faithfulness in effigy was just a detail friends would see, a sculptor's sweet commissioned grace thrown off in helping to prolong the Latin names around the base. They would not guess how early in their supine stationary voyage the air would change to soundless damage, turn the old tenantry away. How soon succeeding eyes begin to look, not read. Rigidly they persisted, linked through lengths and breadths of time. Snow fell, undated. Light each summer thronged the grass. A bright litter of bird calls strewed the same bone-littered ground, and up the paths the endless altered people came, washing at their identity, now helpless in the hollow of an unarmorial age. A trough of smoke in slow suspended skeins above their scrap of history. Only an attitude remains. Time has transfigured them into untruth. The stone fidelity they hardly meant has come to be their final blazon, and to prove our almost instinct, almost true. What will survive of us is love. Now, someone who knew about what will survive of us is love is Christina Rossetti, who wrote this absolutely beautiful, short but beautiful poem, Remember. Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into the silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I, half turned to go, yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day by day you tell us of our future that you planned. Only remember me. You understand, it will be late to counsel then or pray. Yet, if you should forget me for a while, and afterwards remember, do not grieve. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had, better by far you should forget and smile, than that you should remember and be sad. Of course, love comes in all varieties, and one of those varieties is a sad one, unrequited love, something that W.B. Yeats was very familiar with. And he was very familiar with it when he wrote this poem. He wishes for the cloths of heaven. Had I the heavens' embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. Now, someone whose philosophy stood in absolute antithesis to the concept of love wrote a poem called Love's Philosophy. And I'm going to read it now because it is an absolutely beautiful picture of erotic love. And it's by Percy Bysshe Shelley. The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine. In one another's being mingle. Why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heavens, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower could be forgiven, if it disdained its brother. And the sunlight clasps the earth, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What are all these kissings worth, if thou kiss not me? Now, where shall we go? We could go to London. When shall we go there? How about after the lunch? Who should we go there with? Hey, let's go with Wendy Cope. Let's go with Wendy Cope after the lunch to London, specifically Waterloo Bridge. On Waterloo Bridge, where we said our goodbyes, the weather conditions bring tears to my eyes. I wipe them away with a black woolly glove and try not to notice. I've fallen in love. On Waterloo Bridge, I'm trying to think, this is nothing. You're high on the charm and the drink. But the jukebox inside me is playing a song that says something different, and when was it wrong? On Waterloo Bridge, with the wind in my hair, I'm tempted to skip. You're a fool, I don't care. The head does its best, but the heart is the boss. I admit it before I am halfway across. I'd like to pick up that theme of the head does its best, but the heart is the boss in a poem by a poet called Matt Rennick's, a little-known British poet, who's also a lovely chap, in my opinion. And it's called Head and Heart. Your head is where your dreams are born, but not all dreams are good. They'll lead you down a gleaming road until you're lost in a wood. Your thoughts are powerful engines which can drive you off the chart. So harness your dreams and thinking, and don't let your head rule your heart. Your heart is where your passions lie, but what man's heart is true? A heart seeks out a heart's desire, and the reasons in that are few. Your passions may be a thorn in your flesh and leave you among the dead. So channel your passions to a suitable end, and don't let your heart rule your head. Your spirit is born of perfection. It's noble and honest and pure. It holds many answers to life's little trials, and too many ills holds the cure. So capture your thoughts and your passions, bring them under the spirit's control. Don't be seduced by dreams and desires, but be one, mind, body, and soul. Of course, that was written for a woman. Now, what we know about women, we know from great scholars who have gone before us. People like Rudyard Kipling. It couldn't be too long before I got him in. Rudyard Kipling, of course, famously wrote The Female of the Species. And there's some truth to this. There's some that isn't true. Please don't hate me for reading it. When the Himalayan peasant meets the he-bear in his pride, he shouts to scare the monster, who will often turn aside. But the she-bear thus accosted rends the peasant tooth and nail, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. When Nag, the basking cobra, hears the careless foot of man, he will sometimes wriggle sideways and avoid it if he can. But his mate makes no such motion where she camps beside the trail, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. When the early Jesuit fathers preached to Hurons and Choctaws, they prayed to be delivered from the vengeance of the squaws. 'Twas the women, not the warriors, turned those stark enthusiasts pale, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. Man's timid heart is bursting with the things he must not say, for the woman that God gave him isn't his to give away. But when hunter meets with husbands, each confirms the other's tale. The female of the species is more deadly than the male. Man, a bear in most relations, worm and savage otherwise, man propounds negotiations, man accepts the compromise. Very rarely will he squarely push the illogic of a fact to its ultimate conclusion in unmitigated act. Fear or foolishness impels him, ere he lays the wicked low, to concede some form of trial, even to his fiercest foe. Mirth obscene diverts his anger, doubt and pity oft perplex him in dealing with an issue to the scandal of the sex. But the woman that God gave him, every fibre of her frame, proves her launched for one sole issue, armed and engined for the same. And to serve that single issue, lest the generations fail, the female of the species must be deadlier than the male. She who faces death by torture for each life beneath her breast may not deal in doubt or pity, must not swerve for fact or jest. These be purely male diversions, not in these her honour dwells. She, the other law we live by, is that law and nothing else. She can bring no more to living than the powers that make her great, as the mother of the infant and the mistress of the mate. And when her babe and man are lacking, and she strides unclaimed to claim, her right as femme and baron, her equipment is the same. She is wedded to convictions in default of grosser ties. Her contentions are her children. Heaven help him who denies. He will meet no suave discussion, but the instant white-hot, wild-wakened female of the species, warring as for spouse and child. Unprovoked and awful charges, even so the she-bear fights. Speech that drips, corrodes and poisons, even so the cobra bites. Scientific vivisection of one nerve till it is raw, and the victim writhes in anguish like the Jesuit with the squaw. So it comes that man, the coward, when he gathers to confer with his fellow braves in council, dare not leave a place for her, where, at war with life and conscience, he uplifts his erring hands to some god of abstract justice which no woman understands. And man knows it, knows moreover that the woman that God gave him must command, but may not govern, shall enthrall, but not enslave him. And she knows it, because she warns him, and her instincts never fail, that the female of her species is more deadly than the male. And now, a cautionary tale by Hilaire Belloc. I'd like to remind you that a lot of this is coming out of Victorian era and doesn't necessarily translate well into our postmodern culture, for rightly or wrongly. So please don't get too upset if you don't agree with the philosophy of these poems. They're not necessarily my philosophy. Okay, just putting that out there. Matilda, who told lies and was burnt to death. Matilda told such dreadful lies it made one gasp and stretch one's eyes. Her aunt, who from her earliest youth had kept a strict regard for truth, attempted to believe Matilda. The effort very nearly killed her, and would have done so had not she discovered this infirmity. For once, towards the close of day, Matilda, growing tired of play, and finding she was left alone, went tiptoe to the telephone, and summoned the immediate aid of London's noble fire brigade. Within an hour the gallant band were pouring in on every hand, from Putney, Hackney Downs and Bow, with courage high and hearts aglow. They galloped roaring through the town. Matilda's house is burning down! Inspired by British cheers and loud, proceeding from the frenzied crowd, they ran their ladders through a score of windows on the ballroom floor, and took peculiar pains to souse the pictures up and down the house, until Matilda's aunt succeeded in showing them they were not needed. And even then she had to pay to get the men to go away. It happened that a few weeks later, her aunt was off to the theatre to see that interesting play, The Second Mrs. Tanqueray. She had refused to take her niece to hear this entertaining piece, a deprivation just and wise to punish her for telling lies. That night a fire did break out. You should have heard Matilda shout. You should have heard her scream and bawl, and throw the window up and call to people passing in the street, the rapidly increasing heat encouraging her to obtain their confidence, but all in vain. For every time she shouted, "Fire!" they only answered, "Little liar!" And therefore, when her aunt returned, Matilda and the house were burnt. Some of you out there may be primary school teachers or other teachers, and you may be able to identify with our next poem, one written by Alan Alberg, called Please, Mrs. Butler. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps copying my work, miss. What shall I do? Go and sit in the hall, dear. Go and sit in the sink. Take your books on the roof, my lamb. Do whatever you think. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps taking my rubber, miss. What shall I do? Keep it in your hand, dear. Hide it up your vest. Swallow it, if you like, my love. Do what you think best. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps calling me rude names, miss. What shall I do? Lock yourself in a cupboard, dear. Run away to sea. Do whatever you can, my flower, but don't ask me. Good old Alan Alberg. Another amusing poet was T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was called by one of his friends Old Possum, and therefore he immortalized this in his book Old Possum's Book of Cats, later to be adapted into the musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, Cats, which is soon to be come out as a film, and I'm quite looking forward to going to see it. So, I'm going to read from T.S. Eliot's Old Possum Book of Cats, the poem Bustopher Jones, and with this I shall close. Bustopher Jones is not skin and bones. In fact, he's remarkably fat. He doesn't hoard pubs, he has 8 or 9 clubs, for he's the St. James's Street cat. He's the cat we all greet as he walks down the street in his coat of fastidious black. No commonplace mouses have such well-cut trousers, or such an impeccable back. In the whole of St. James, the smartest of names, is the name of this Brummel of cats. And we're all of us proud to be nodded or bowed to by Bustopher Jones in white spats. His visits are occasional to the senior educational, and it is against the rules for any one cat to belong both to that and the joint superior schools. For a similar reason, when game is in season, he is found not at foxes, but blimpies. He is frequently seen at the gay stage and screen, which is famous for winkles and shrimps. In the season of venison, he gives his benison to the pot hunter's succulent bones. And just before noon's not a moment too soon to drop in for a drink at the drones. When he's seen in a hurry, there's probably curry at the Siamese or at the Glutton. And if he looks full of gloom, then he's lunched at the Tomb on cabbage, rice pudding, and mutton. So much in this way passes Bustopher's day. At one club or another he's found. It can be no surprise that under our eyes he has grown unmistakably round. He's a 25-pounder, or I am a bounder, and he's putting on weight every day. But he's so well preserved because he's observed all his life a routine. So he'll say, or to put it in rhyme, "I shall last out my time," is the word of this stoutest of cats. It must and it shall be spring in Pall Mall, while Bustopher Jones wears white spats. Thank you very much for joining me on this little trip through a few of my favourite poems. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like like this video. If you would like to hear more, please subscribe to my channel. If you would like to know when the next live stream is, I mean, I know I would like to know when the next live stream is, but I don't, then please click on the little bell icon. And if you feel that there's someone you know who could benefit from a half an hour or so spent in the company of myself reading poems, please feel free to share this video with anyone you like. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if not, then don't tell anyone. Or you could put the thumbs down if you'd like to do that. If you don't like it, please do that, because that counts as much as that on the YouTube algorithms. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and goodbye.